Go ahead.
Hey, Coach. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for talking with us today. I don't think I'm going out on a limb here when I say that this program and this university has been a leader and a model for the country during the offseason, especially when it comes to COVID protocol. We saw last week the Milwaukee Bucks lead the way in boycotting competition and other teams following suit. So my question is, if there is a boycott in college football, how likely is it that we see Syracuse lead the way in that regard in terms of boycotting?
Boycotting for what reason?
For social injustice, police brutality, things of that nature?
I don't know. I don't have an answer for that one. I wouldn't know how to start it or how to finish it. I think that's something you probably need to ask the young men about.
Okay, and have there been conversations about the shooting of Jacob Blake? And if so, what have they been?
The conversations was we had a conversation about it on the football field. I want to say the day that it happened or maybe the day afterwards. And we got into some discussions about that. And then we had another meeting where they were allowed to ask questions about anything that was going on in more of a team atmosphere type thing. But of course, those things are all in-house type stuff. But we had two conversations.
Thank you so much, Coach.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we'll go to Mark Larson from Spectrum News. Mark, go ahead.
Okay, hey, Mike, can you please give me permission to record real quick?
Yep. Sorry, Mark.
All right, there we go. Coach, how are you? It's been so long. Hope you're well. Just wanted to see if you had a reaction to Coach Thompson of Georgetown's passing, first African-American head coach to win a national championship. And I know it's not your sport, but any reaction to that?
Yeah, a very, very powerful trailblazer, someone that went across all avenues of sports. I've even been at a banquet where I've listened to him speak before. Powerful, powerful presence. Someone that if you were a young coach at the time like I was, and if you aspired into becoming a head coach, someone that you needed to listen to. He had extreme knowledge, and there's no doubt that his knowledge was power.
Thank you. And the second question I have was just about your season. You're less than 2 weeks away. And in all your years of coaching, you've already said this preseason is unlike any other. Does this season feel, how different does it feel, I guess? Of course, it feels different with the 2 weeks away, but how different is it getting ready to play football with everything else you've been talking about for the last few months?
Well, it's extremely different. There's nothing to relate it to. And every day there's, you feel like the fires over there in California. Every day there's something else propping up that you've got to put out. But I really think that one of the things that we need to really be concerned about is the mental health issue that's going on with the young people today. Is a lot of those things that they're dealing with, you really wish that they didn't have to deal with at that age, that really you would hope the older generation would have took care of some of those ills. But, it's one of those times where there's a lot of pain, and where there's a lot of pain, there's normally a lot of growth as well once it's all over.
Coach, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we'll go to Christian from Noon's Magician. Christian, go ahead.
Hey, Coach, how you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us. So, obviously, one of the big changes this year has been the defense, and with the new 3-3-5, you have that unique rover position in the middle of the secondary. I'm wondering, have you settled yet on a person that could start the year in that role? And how unique is that role in terms of their responsibilities and their actions on the field?
Well, first of all, we're still working through some of that stuff, but I think we've got a really good guy to play that role. I'm not at liberty to tell you now because it'd be an advantage to our opponents, but it's one of those positions where they're going to have a lot to do with winning and losing, and because they're in the middle of the defense. If you want to have a good football team, you need to be strong up the middle like a baseball team. You talk baseball, you better have a catcher, you better have a pitcher, you better have a shortstop, you better have a center fielder. If you don't have those things, chances are you may win some games, but you're not going anywhere. It's the exact same thing on a football field. You need to have a tailback, you need to have a quarterback, you need to have a center, you need to have a nose tackle or a big guy in the middle, one technique. You better have a Mike linebacker that can play, and you better have a safety. And our rover position is a safety that's in the middle of our defense. So it's really important who plays that position, because they can touch all parts of the field. They can't get ran away from. And you want your go-getters to be in the middle of the football field where you can't get schemed. They can't get schemed out of what's going on, that they're going to be able to touch somebody on every single snap. Hope that answers your question, Christian.
Yeah, that does. Thank you. And I was wondering, we mentioned it a couple of times last week, but True Williams in the recent scrimmage release on Houston.com was listed as a safety. And I know he was listed as the starting cornerback in the spring depth chart before practices got shut down. I was wondering, have you really committed to a set position yet that Trill's going to play, or do you see him literally bouncing all around that secondary?
The answer to the question is yes, we have committed to a position that he's going to play. And yes, he still has the flexibility to bounce all around the secondary.
All right, great. Thanks, Coach.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Andrea Adelson from ESPN.com. Andrea, go ahead.
Hey, Dino, thanks for doing this. I wanted to follow up with what you said about mental health. What specifically are maybe some of the biggest mental health challenges that these guys are facing right now that you've seen, and what types of ways is Syracuse offering support in that aspect?
Andrea, you're going way, I can't go that far out on the branch. I'm going to fall down on my butt and break something. You know, we've got people that our young people can talk to. We've got people who are tied in to the administration that they can go to right away. But it's so much, there's been so much different stuff that's been different about 2020, and it affects people in different ways. And the crazy thing is sometimes it affects people at different times. You know, what affects them in 1 month didn't 2 months later, you know, is affecting someone else. And it's the same thing that happened 2 months ago, where the one person stepped up right away and the other person kept it buried, and then it came out 60 days later. So that's where I'm going to stop at. But I just think it's been a very, very difficult year for the young people and the old people in the country. But for the young people, I think it's been extremely difficult. And it's kind of sad that they've had to deal with some of these issues that I'm talking about we as an older generation didn't clean up a long time ago.
Thanks, Dino.
Thank you.
We'll go to Darius Joshua from News Channel 9. Darius, go ahead.
How you doing, Coach? Kind of following up on that. I remember the first time, or not the first time, but when this happened back with George Floyd, and you had mentioned that you had a statement ready, and after meeting with the players, you realized how much they actually wanted to kind of hear from you in that situation. How, I guess, having this happen again, how did you try to handle this one differently? How did this whole experience of the last couple of months, how did that affect how this time around you tried to hear your players and all of that?
Well, again, the big difference between the first one and the second one to me was that my players were here. So where I can touch them, I can see them, I can feel them. Well, I can't touch them and see them because of COVID-19, but they're right there in front of me. So obviously we addressed it right away. And then we took another time where they could bring it up and talk about it. A little State of the Union, you know, what's on your heart, what's on your mind, go ahead and bring it up. There is no subjects, and let's see if we can talk some of this stuff out. So that was basically the big difference, is I could touch them compared to the first time where they were all over the country.
What is kind of your reaction when you see what the NBA did, multiple leagues kind of following suit, and then had some of your players kind of reach out on Twitter? What kind of is your reaction to that in terms of how athletes have tried to use their positions, use their platforms to make that kind of difference, and have some of your own players try to do that in their own way as college athletes?
You kind of confused me a little bit at the end there, Darius. Like I was with you on the basketball and you said something I could barely hear what you said at the end.
So I'm saying that, what is your reaction to that, having all the athletes in pro sports, you know, NBA and multiple leagues kind of trying to use their platforms, and then having your own athletes do it in their own ways, somewhat similar kind of the way some of them sent out some tweets and things like that. Just kind of what is your reaction to athletics and athletes trying to use that platform and try to make it? I
think obviously it's a strong stance. I think it's not, there's certain things that impress certain people. I thought that obviously the basketball people doing what they did was impressive. I thought was more impressive was how it branched across all the other sports. You know, how some baseball teams did something, the WNBA did. I mean, that's the thing that was extremely impressive, is how they all locked in as professionals. I thought that was really cool.
Thank you, Coach.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we'll go to Stephen Bailey from Syracuse.com. Stephen, go ahead.
Hey, Dino, I asked you a little bit about the offensive line last week. I wanted to hit on two other position groups that I was kind of interested to see what happened this offseason, and obviously didn't personally see anything. Can you give us a little bit of a breakdown on the running backs and the linebackers? What's the competition been like there? And do you have a feel for who your guys are going to be?
No, I think there's some situations that we're still trying to work out at some of those positions. Some of it has to do with injuries and some of it has to do with other things. And once all that stuff settles down, we'll be able to have a clearer picture to give you exactly what's going on at those positions.
I wanted to follow about two specific guys. You know, we've been getting pictures and videos kind of throughout camp and trying to see who's there, who's not there. Two guys who haven't popped up are Abdul Adams and Jarvion Howard. Two of your top running backs. Are those guys practicing? Are you expecting to have them? What are the situation with those two?
I think that you've got both those guys' telephone numbers and emails and Twitter accounts that you can talk to them directly and find out exactly what's going on.
Thanks, Dino.
Next, we'll go to Adam Hillman from the Daily Orange. Adam, go ahead.
Hey, Coach. How's it going?
Good.
So can you kind of talk me through, when you first met Andre Cisco, what were your first impressions of him, and how have you seen him grow over the years?
Cisco, Andre is a very, how do I say it? He's very loud on the football field, but when he gets off the football field, I see him as a quiet, I'm not going to say loner. I mean, people likes to be around him and he likes to be around people, but he really likes his quiet time, so to speak, or his downtime. A lot of the times when he's not on the football field, I think he spends a lot of time by himself. But it's interesting to find someone that's so quiet off the field that when he's on the football field, he's loud. And when I mean loud, I don't mean he's doing a bunch of talking. I just means he shows up and people know who he is based off of how he plays.
Mm-hmm. And so when you first met him, how could you tell, one thing that seems like really is particular about him is he's got a lot of ambition. He's got a lot of determination and drive. How could you sense that the first time you met him, and how have you sensed that since?
He's just one of those guys. How do I say it? There's a difference between self-confidence and conceit. And some people say it's a very thin line. Trill has a lot of self-confidence. I don't think he's conceited at all. I don't think he crosses that line. But he really believes in the things that he can do, and he really works hard to make sure that he's able to do those things.
Thanks, Coach.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we'll go to Matt Hosworth from CNY Central. Matt, go ahead.
Hey, Coach, how are you?
Can barely hear you, Matt. I'm okay.
Hold on. I think I had something in front of it. Can you hear me now?
I'm going to try to listen really hard.
All right, maybe I'll step a little bit closer to the mic here. I wanted to ask you about the numbers that were put up in this last scrimmage. The defense, 10 sacks. Was that more of this defensive line getting you excited, or do you feel like this offensive line needs a little bit more work?
Well, you got to understand that we played everybody on our football team. So that's 100 snaps, half by the ones, half by the twos. When you break out our two offensive line and you break out our two defensive line, they look different. Those freshmen that haven't been in the weight room for a year with us looks different than our second defensive line. So the numbers were impressive for the defense. There's no doubt. I was impressed with the interceptions. There were some interceptions that you guys didn't get to see them, but they weren't like they were just thrown to them. Those guys were making some plays, but there was a lot of times there was sacks. Now, the other thing you got to remember is that quarterbacks are in black jerseys. They're not allowed to scramble around. They're not really allowed to miss a guy. If a guy beats an offensive lineman, it's a quick whistle, okay, which goes to an automatic sack, regardless of whether the quarterback could have navigated that guy or not. Now, when it's with the twos and threes, those guys are live. But with the first group, it's a really quick whistle. We can't take any chances of getting those guys hurt.
And a quick follow-up, speaking with Tony White, how impressed are you with how he's been able to lead this defense, so far since he's been here?
I think him and Coach Gilbert have done a fantastic job with the lack of spring ball. This is, to be a new the OC, obviously, he's got more things to tie into because the terminology and everything is very close to being the same. But for the defensive side of the ball, they've done an outstanding job, about as well as you could do with in the Zoom world. You were talking about when this 2020 started, I was an anti-Zoom guy. Now, I'm not saying that I want to invite it to Christmas, but it could come over for Thanksgiving if it wanted to, okay? So Zoom's a little bit different. I think those guys have done a fantastic job of making up some ground from a mental standpoint. The thing that really concerns me, and I'm sure it concerns, I don't want to speak for all coaches across the country, it's like putting guys out there to play a baseball game and they've seen a bunch of fastballs, but they've never seen a breaker. They've never seen a curve. They've never seen anything, another type of pitch. You wonder, you don't wonder. I know that some of the techniques and fundamentals are losing ground because we haven't had the time that we needed to. And that's why I would imagine a lot of coaches, the more experienced your team is, you're probably going to start those more experienced guys than maybe some hotshot young guy that has some skills, but he doesn't have all the fundamentals and techniques down yet, because an older guy with that base could really give somebody that's maybe a better athlete some trouble. So until these guys play themselves into techniques and fundamentals, I'd imagine a lot of teams are going to be going with older lineups until the young guys can clearly separate themselves from the older kids in front of them if they have an opportunity to beat them out.
Thanks, Dino.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we'll go to Josh Miller from the News House. Josh, go ahead.
Hey, Coach, thanks for taking the time today. What have you and your staff done or emphasized to your guys to make sure that your team keeps their focus with everything going on and all these other distractions?
Just doing a lot of talking, pulling out the team leaders, doing a lot of not only group talking, but team talking, individual talking. When they have a question, ask it. When they have a concern, give it to us. Let's not let it fester. Okay, don't simmer with it. Let's get right to it and see if we can get those questions answered for you, so we can take that mental load off of you and free your mind so you can relax and get back to the basics, so to speak, to get back to the things that you need to do for us to be not only a good student, but also a good football player.
And then a quick follow-up I had was, what has stood out to you about Coach Gilbert thus far? What have you liked? What have you maybe talked to him about that needs to be worked on with the offense?
Coach Gilbert is fiery. He's fiery, and he's had success, okay, at a lot of different places and a lot of different venues at some of the biggest stages there are. You know, when you look at his record and the quarterbacks that he's coached and the places he's been, it's going to be really hard for some Sunday morning quarterback to be challenging him on something. And that's one of the things I love best about him.
Thanks, Coach.
Next, we'll go to John Kikis from the Associated Press. John, go ahead.
Hey, Coach. Thanks for doing this. Considering the mental aspect of what's going on, do you expect the players you have now are going to remain, or do you anticipate any opt-outs?
Here's the truest answer I can give you. It's the answer that I cannot stand. IDK. I don't know. You know, it's just been one of those years where you gotta stay flexible. You gotta bend. I can't answer that question. There's a lot of freedom with the opt-out, and you know, if they want to, they can.
And have there been any more positive cases?
No, sir. We just got our test results back. I don't know what the numbers are up to now, but no positives.
Thanks, Coach.
Yes, sir.
Next, we'll go to Dan Tortora. Dan, go ahead.
Hey, Coach, how are you?
Good.
Coach, just what you can say about, you know, I know you said you don't like the IDK, the I don't knows. What has been the biggest challenge for you? I mean, you're not only trying to get ready for a season and trying to be a leader throughout all this, but there's also being a leader when it comes to social justice, and there's also trying to navigate through coronavirus. What has all of this taught you, and what have been your biggest challenges in your opinion?
Well, the biggest challenge is you have to stay focused on the things that you're the most responsible for. I could go off and do a whole bunch of things right now, but I'm not going to be able to do all those things good. You know, one of the stories we tell players, our freshman players, when they come in, is that there's 3 things that happen on a college football campus, okay? One is you're a student athlete, you need to take care of your academics. 2, because you're here playing football and we're paying for this very expensive private education, okay, you need to work on your football skills as well. And then the third thing that normally happens on a college campus is the social aspect of things. Out of those 3 things, most 18-year-olds can do 2 of them really well if they focus. If they try to do all 3, there's normally going to be a weakness somewhere. So my main thing is I need to be able to lead in all 3 of those areas. But as we get closer and closer to the season, obviously, I need to be focusing more and more on the opponents and the job that I have in leading these young men on the field, and still try to find time for the mental health part of it and some of the social things that are going on with the pandemic. It's going to be 2020 will be unlike any season that we've ever gone through. And the closer that I can keep it to being normal on the football field, I think the better off the young men will be, even though there's going to be major distractions with the social injustices and with the COVID-19 pandemic.
And how have you, knowing that this climate is more different than it's ever been, to know that some conferences are playing, some aren't, some conferences aren't, but their teams can play. Some teams are opting out even if their conferences are playing. Did you ever think you'd experience anything like this as a head coach in college football?
No, I don't think anyone can say that they saw this crystal ball coming. If they did, they're making all the money on the stock market as well. I mean, this is unprecedented without a doubt. But again, if you find a way to survive it, it's going to make you stronger and it's going to make you better. And that's what I'm trying to do with our family over here at Syracuse.
Thank you, Coach, and stay safe as always.
Thank you, Dan.
Next, we'll go to Anthony from the Daily Orange. Anthony, go ahead.
Hey, Dino. To use your words, you talked about saying that you don't want to be occasionally great, you want to be consistently good. How does Dino Babers judge his progress through 4 years, entering year 5?
I would say that I'm not as bad as 4 and 8, and I'm probably not as good as 10 and 3. I'm probably somewhere in between. And I think that the process is the most important thing. I think the process is working. I think we had a major rebuild here. Okay, there was a reason why it was the way it was. But I think the rebuild is starting to happen. There was 2 ways to do it. We could try to be really good and get everybody excited, or we could go really, really slow and hope at the end that you're still there. Well, I went for the first part. I said, let's see if we can do it quickly, and now let's rebuild this thing the right way and make it last forever. So we gave you a little bit, and now we're trying to turn this thing into a place where it's consistently good, and we have bowl games year after year after year here.
And in terms of Aaron Hackett, how are you planning to use him more, maybe outside of the red zone this year, and how have you seen his development?
First of all, Aaron's obviously came off of an injury. He's practicing now full speed. When it gets into how we're going to use him in the game, that'll be too much of an advantage for me to go over that on this Zoom call that everybody else gets. But he's one of our most experienced players. He's a fabulous blocker. And, he was the guy that caught the ball against Clemson before their 2-minute and 45-second drive, caught the ball in a very, very difficult catch. And if we had the first down, we'd have won the game the second year in a row. But that's when they had the left tackle downfield too far, so they took that play away from us and made us do another play at Clemson. So he's one of those guys that we feel that we can go to at any moment in the game, and we think that he's the type of guy that can make a play for us.
Thanks, Dino.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we'll go to Nico from CNY Central. Nico, go ahead.
Hey, Coach. Appreciate it again. I know you can't talk about the process and waiting for a crisp like in the waiver and things like that. So I guess my question is, given that we're so close to the season, how difficult is it to, not know whether or not a potential contributor to your team will be in the lineup in week 1 or week 2 or whatever? I guess the timing is my question here.
Nico, based off of the things that have happened since I've been the head coach here for the last going on 5 years, I anticipated it being like this. I mean, when have we ever got a result back so quick that we didn't have to worry about it? So I know everybody else, I've seen some really colorful stuff by some of the faces on this screen about it. And trust me, I read everything. I try to read everything. And I really do appreciate it. But as far as me being uncomfortable about it, it's status quo. It's what it's always happened since I've been at Syracuse. I don't expect it to be any different.
Well, they haven't answered my email, but I'll send them another one today. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Next, we'll go to Dylan with Fox 40 News in Binghamton. Dylan, go ahead.
Hey, Coach. Thanks for your time today. You talked a lot about what an unconventional season and off season it's been. I guess just talking about, a little over a week from the first game of the season, how has it all kind of shifted your expectations for the season?
No shift. I think that there's going to be some up and down teams. I think with all the stuff going on that there's going to be stretches where one team stays extremely focused for 3 or 4 weeks, and then all of a sudden something will happen and they'll lose their focus just because you're dealing with young people between the ages of 18 to 22 that's got a lot going on in their lives. So I think the team that can stay focused the longest and just keep their head down and keep working, keep going today, working with that hard hat on, I think they may have a type of season that a lot of people may feel is unexpected. So our thing is we're just really trying to stay locked in, hopefully get to that first game and actually get to see it's kicked off. And then once you kicked off on the first game, hoping that you get an opportunity to see the kickoff on the last one.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Danny Emmerman from the Daily Orange. Danny, go ahead.
Hey, Dino.
Danny.
A few of your players have expressed some concern with, the way other students on campus have been, behaving and also potentially, interacting with them in class. But obviously Syracuse offers all classes online as an option. Did you ever recommend that your players take all their classes online?
I'm not in charge of any of their academics. Our academics are very unique at Syracuse. It's the only time I've been a head coach where I don't have any charge. I don't have any say-so in their academics. It's handled through a different situation, which is unique, which I'm in favor of here. And that goes through their academic counselors on whether they go to class or they stay online. I absolutely have no call in any of that stuff.
Are you more comfortable with them taking online classes in terms of the risk of getting the virus?
No, I mean, for them going to class and catching the virus is no different than them going to Wegmans and catching the virus, or going down and get their gas tank filled and catching the virus, or them showing up at the mall. Okay, I think they understand the rules. They understand how to social distancing, about washing their hands, keeping their distance, wearing their mask. And as long as they're doing those things, whether they're at Wegmans or in the classroom, it should make no difference as long as they're taking care of themselves.
Thanks, Dino.
Thank you.
Okay, Coach, we got time for 2 more questions. We'll go next to Josh Payne with 247. Josh, go ahead. Or Jacob, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. Coach, you just mentioned having a State of the Union address with the team. I'm curious how involved the coaching staff was during those talks, or was it mostly player-led?
No, when we have State of the Unions, I might have an agenda that I need to talk about, but State of the Unions are for the players. Sometimes there's questions they want. Sometimes we have individual meetings where a player can come in and talk to me about anything, but I really like to have, if they have something they need to take care of, or coach, what happened with blah, blah, blah. I like the whole family being there because some of them may have the same questions and maybe they were afraid to ask, or they're not up to date on something that's going on with their academics. And when they hear someone else ask, it triggers something that maybe they should go do that as well. So when we have State of the Unions outside of my short list, it's whatever they want to talk about.
Are some State of the Unions better than others? How productive was this latest one?
I think we got all their questions asked. It was unlimited. I want to say we started at around 4 p.m. and it doesn't end until all the questions are asked. So until they're done, I'm still in there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And then our last question today comes from Josh Miller at the News House. Josh, go ahead.
Thanks. Hey, Coach, when you look at the offensive line and analyze the offensive line and you think about improvements, do you think it's a communication thing? Do you think it's a leadership thing? What do you look at when you look at the offensive line? You're like, this needs work.
I think the biggest thing with the offensive line is all of them working together. They're one of the few groups where you really got to know the guy next to you. And the longer they work together, the better they are. When you have injuries in that group and you put a new guy next to another guy, there's a learning curve that has to happen between those two guys as far as exchanging blocks and making calls and knowing what someone's going to do or what they're not going to do. So that's the biggest thing. When you trade a wide receiver or trade a DB, they're just coming in and playing their position. They're normally out there on islands. The closer the offensive linemen work together all the time. They're like your left hand and your right hand working together. And they really got to have a feel for each other if they're really going to be above average, so to speak. And that's the big thing, is trying to keep the same 5 to 7 guys working all the time together, and so they can have a feel for one another.
Have you seen the relationship improve between those 5 to 7 guys and quarterback Tommy DeVito throughout camp and throughout this summer into now the season starting in 12 days?
I think the biggest thing is what we do now for our first opponent. When we start in two-a-days, we're not just playing North Carolina, we're playing every opponent that we have. And there's things that we do in camp that to teach somebody something that we may not do during the game to win the football game. Okay, now you get into personnel and you may not block a guy one-on-one because he's so good. Why would we want to block Chandler Jones one-on-one with a freshman, blah, blah, blah? We're just not going to do that. Where we're going to do some things from a coaching standpoint, turn your line one way, put a running back with an offensive tackle, where you got to be able to account for outstanding personnel. So two-a-days, I say two-a-days, that's how old I am. When you're going through camp through one-a-days, you're working on your entire season. As you get to work for an opponent, now the coaches get to chime in, so to speak, and make sure that we're going to do the things or the protections or the runs that's best for our personnel that gives us the best opportunity to win as a team.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you.
All right, Coach, we're out of time for today. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, guys and gals.
Bye.
Bye-bye.